Now we want to talk about the very important part of this process called building your intervention team. We want to bring together all the most important people in the addict's or alcoholic's life and build them into a very effective team.
And you start doing that simply by making a list. You want to write down all the people that you can think of that are important and significant in the alcoholic's life. Sometimes people want to edit and say, oh no, I can't have this person on the list. This is not the time. You want to write everybody down. Start with family members. Write everybody down. Then go to friends, even friends that perhaps the addict hasn't seen in a few years. Go on to people that she might work with, a boss, clergy people. Maybe she's really close to her minister at her church. Anyone you can think of that's important to the alcoholic or addict should go on this list.
And don't hesitate to put people on the list who live far away. For example, there may be a favorite aunt who lives 1,000 miles away. But very often we find that those people are willing to travel to be part of an intervention, and they become a very powerful part of the team because, of course, the alcoholic knows the distance that they've traveled to come there.
And oftentimes the family member writing the list will say, oh, I couldn't ask them. I couldn't ask them to go to so much trouble. Ask them. Let them decide. Don't make the decision for them. Oftentimes people feel so honored to be part of the process and they care so much about the person, they're more than willing to make the arrangements, take the time off work, and get on a plane and come and be part of the intervention team.
Another mistake people make is not including a friend who perhaps has been alienated over time and they don't really see each other anymore. But believe me, those old friends, those good friends who maybe have dropped out of the picture because of the alcohol and drug use, can again be a very powerful part of the team because they hearken back to a time when the person really had their life a little bit more together. And by coming to the intervention, they demonstrate that love and concern that's so powerful.
And it's important to realize at this point when you're putting this list together, don't call anyone yet and don't talk to anyone about intervention yet. You're just making a master list and you're going to choose which people are most appropriate from this list to include in your intervention team. And we're going to talk about that.
So now you've got your master list and now you're going to determine who it is that you're going to call. Again, you're really focusing on the people that the alcoholic loves, the people that they respect. They may or may not have a great relationship with them right now, but we're looking over the lifespan and looking at the people that they really love and respect. And so you're going to take it bit by bit. You want to call the people that you really know are going to say yes first. So start building the team, and that way when you get to more reluctant people, people are not really sure whether they want to be part of it or not, you can say, well, we've already got Aunt Mary and Uncle Joe and Sammy's coming in from Wichita and so forth. So start building the team with the ones that you know are going to say yes first.
Because realize that the people that are the most reluctant are usually people who've been hurt by the alcoholic, they've been disappointed, they may believe, there's really nothing we can do, we've tried everything in the past, or they might just think, it's just none of my business. And but usually it's always based in some hurt and some anger. And I always say, if people are reluctant, don't try to change their mind. Listen, just listen to what they have to say. Empathize with them, meet them where they're at. Because usually when people say, no, I don't think I can do that, or I can't be part of an intervention, what they're really saying to you is, I need more information.
That's right. A lot of times people will change their minds once they realize that this isn't some free-form process that you're putting together out of the blue, but that you're really following a method. You may want them to read a book. You may want them to watch this video with you or in the privacy of their own home so that they realize that there is a real intervention process here and that they're going to be part of an organized team.
Well, not only that it's a process, but people have a misconception about intervention. They think that this is an attack on the alcoholic, that it's going to be, a very unpleasant experience, when they realize that intervention, the way we do it today, is a very, very loving process, that we use love to break through denial. We certainly don't use anger, we don't use judgment, and we don't use blame. People feel much more comfortable moving forward. And what I often say to people is, don't rush in and say, we have to do an intervention, we have to do it right now, because that might be too frightening for people. They may back up and say, wait a minute, I don't know if I can do that. But if you can approach people and say to them, would you be willing to learn something new that could really help our brother decide to get help for his cocaine problem? Most people are willing to take small steps. Most people are willing to say, okay, I'd be willing to take a look at a video.
And you'll be able to bring them along little by little into the intervention team.
That's right. Because again, nobody has to make a decision right away. Nobody has to say yes to the big picture right away. All we have to do is say yes to the next small step. And oftentimes with people who remain reluctant, we say to them, you know what, it is perfectly okay not to participate in the intervention, but would you participate in the training process and would you participate in the rehearsal? So you get a really good feeling for what we're doing. And so even if you don't participate in the intervention, you'll know exactly what we're doing. And so often when people say yes to that, and when they do participate in the training, they end up participating in the intervention. But if they don't want to at that point, it's better that they don't participate.
Now let's talk about who not to call. There can be friends and family members who we may want to involve in the intervention process, but who we know if we tell them that there's an intervention in the offing, they're going to tip off the alcoholic and spoil the whole thing. So if we determine that we want them on the team and we don't want to exclude them, then we're going to only bring them into the team probably 24 hours in advance, bring them up to speed quickly, and then make them part of the intervention. Another time that we may not want to call someone right away or perhaps exclude them altogether is if we have a friend or family member or associate of the alcoholic who is an alcoholic or drug addict themselves. They may be completely inappropriate for the team, and so we have to keep them off. On the other hand, if this friend or associate or family member thinks of themselves as being much better than the alcoholic that we are intervening on, they may be a very powerful part of the intervention team. They may be able to say something like, listen, Joe, I've had a lot of drinks with you over the years. We've had a lot of fun together, but it's time for you to get some help because things have really gotten out of hand. And a letter from a person like that can be very powerful. Their presence on the team can be very constructive. But it can be a little bit dicey, and it may be one of these situations where, again, you might want to consider having a professional interventionist on board to help you moderate things and keep everything on track. Now, another thing to think about is whether you're going to involve children. For example, if you are intervening on a mother or a father who has younger children, we normally have a cutoff age of about 12 years old. You need to be at least that old to participate in an intervention.
And we always want it to be the child's choice. In some cases, when the children have been observing a lot of the drinking behavior, they can really be empowered by being part of the intervention. They've really been through it with the parent and going through this loving intervention, having a voice, seeing the other adults around them take responsible action to help their mother, to help their father, is very, very positive for children. But other children do not want to be involved, and they should never be coerced.
But they might feel that they want to write a letter, or maybe they'd be willing to write a letter, and that can be part of the process, and they don't have to be present themselves, just in case things do get a little emotional.
And another thing I always like to say to families, that if a child is involved, at the rehearsal, sometimes there might be sensitive information that's being discussed that really the child shouldn't hear. And always be sensitive to that. Always make sure those discussions happen outside of the ear range of the child. You know, if the father, for instance, has a girlfriend on the side, that's not something you want to be discussing in front of a 12-year-old child. So those discussions should all happen separately. There are times that we do not want to include children in the intervention. As I've already said, the child should be at least 12 years old. If they're younger than 12, it's really not appropriate for them to participate. Also, if the child shows any reluctance whatsoever, please don't push them into doing an intervention. What I like to see is a child who really wants to participate. They're very, very enthusiastic about it. Those are the children who should be part of the intervention. I'd also like to say if this child has been abused by the parent or severely neglected by the parent, it's probably much, much too emotional. It's not even something the child can make a good decision about, so the adults in the family should not even broach the topic of participating in the intervention under such circumstances. And I'd like to make one other point. If a child participates in the intervention, and at the end of the day, the parent says no to treatment, somebody who is particularly close to that child should take them aside privately and tell them, you know, your mom couldn't accept help today because her disease will not let her accept help. She's too sick to say yes. But you need to know that this does not mean that your mother doesn't love you. She loves you very, very much, but it's the addiction that's controlling what she does and what she doesn't do. This is so important because oftentimes when a parent does not agree to get help, the child thinks, maybe they don't love me enough, or maybe I didn't do a good job. So you need to be really supportive of them, tell them how great they were, and how the other adults, how the non-addicted adults in their life are going to continue working till their mother or their father finally says yes. So what should your final intervention team look like? Typically, an intervention team is going to be anywhere from 3 to 8 people, sometimes as many as 10 or 12. You know, there have been times I've worked with families, large families. I remember one large family, and we had 15 people because we needed to. Everybody was so close to the alcoholic. And in cases like that, when you have a bigger team, you can compensate by making your letters shorter so that it doesn't take so much time that you lose the alcoholic's attention. And if you have a very small team, maybe only 1 or 2 people, you don't really have a group, so that's a good time to involve a professional interventionist.
And when you get into the training process, you want to make sure that everybody is using the same training tools, whether that's a book or this video or whatever it is that you're using. You want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and they're exposed to the same information.
And remember through the whole process, once you have your team together, that you're collecting information together, you're recording information on the organizer, on the checklist, but that everybody's involved in gathering information and it all goes to your detail person so you stay organized and you stay on point.
One good little tool you can use too, I mean, many families are spread out geographically and everybody isn't really available to meet all the time. And you may want to have 1 or 2 conference calls prior to coming together for your final rehearsal. And you'll find if you just search on the internet that there are several good free conference call services that you can use, or low-cost services that will make this really easy to do. The next item we want to talk about is how or if to involve the workplace in the intervention process. You know, every company in America is struggling with the fact that they have some employees with chemical dependency problems, and they know that these problems cost the company money. So even though families are often reluctant to involve the workplace or even approach them anonymously, the fact is that companies are glad when people actually get help for their problem or a family step forward to help and make something happen. So don't be reluctant to take those first steps. They can be done anonymously.
Well, and because companies invest a lot of money in hiring and training people, so if an employee has a problem, they'd much rather help them solve the problem than to lose that employee and start all over again.
And there's a very easy way to do this. In a larger company, you can place an anonymous phone call to the personnel department or to the EAP, that stands for Employee Assistance Program. And you can ask them what are their policies around people getting help for alcohol and drug problems. You can identify yourself just anonymously as a family member and find out what the policy is.
And oftentimes in the intervention, all you need to do is present to the alcoholic what the policy is for a medical leave of absence and what they need to do to get that ball rolling and get things in motion, and they feel confident then about saying, yes, I can accept help.
For almost every company, it's going to be treated as a medical issue because after all, it is a medical issue. And it's really just as though you had a heart attack and had to go to the hospital and you're going to be off work. That's the end of it. It's a medical issue. And in all companies, your confidentiality is protected. Now, sometimes companies are so small and they already know about the problem in some way, so people are going to put 2 plus 2 together. But in larger organizations, your confidentiality is assured by law, and that's why there are things like the employee assistance programs and, frankly, the personnel departments to keep that veil of confidentiality from letting the information go to a supervisor.
And some families take it a step further. They may know a coworker and they call the coworker and they confide in them and they get a sense of what's going on in the workplace, if the drinking or the drugs is causing a problem, and who to call, who to talk to. And this is usually somebody that they know personally and they feel very comfortable confiding in. So that's another good step to take. And of course, many families call the boss directly.
That's right, because in smaller companies or maybe a medical partnership or a law practice, the people are very close that are working together and they know that there's a problem. And so it's possible to place a phone call to the boss or the partner or the coworker and bring them into the process. They're usually more than happy to be part of it, and there isn't going to be any recrimination.
Jeff, I have to tell you, I did an intervention where the family decided not to contact the workplace, even though the dad of the alcoholic knew his boss. And when the alcoholic refused to accept treatment, saying, I can't accept treatment because I have to go to work, the dad, right in the middle of the intervention, picked up the phone, called the boss. And interestingly, the boss said to the father, he said, listen, I've been so worried about your son. I've been thinking about firing him for his drinking problem. So I'm so happy to hear that you're doing this. And tell him I support you, and I don't want to see him back at work until he's completed treatment. And that changed everything. He went to treatment that day.
Absolutely. Of course, for many addicts, the job situation is going to be their most substantial objection to going to treatment right here and now. So you want to make sure that you've got that base covered.
That's right. When you have somebody from the job on the team, or aware of the intervention and supportive of the team, it really increases your probability of success for your intervention. And I think we can close by saying, once you're on the team, now you've made a commitment. You've made a commitment to the team as a whole and to the alcoholic or addict.
Very good.